Welcome boys and girls, Christine here with a discussion about American planes in Broken Arrow. Going over the different types of planes, the role that they have in a battle, how you can use them for the different battle groups. Now of course you do have two battle groups that you can use. The only one that doesn't have any planes is the Armored Brigade. So starting with the USMC, they have Harriers, EA-6B Prowlers, F-18s, F-35, and KC-130J, Harvest Hawk. So let's start talking about the Harriers. So you have the Harrier 2 Plus and the Night Attack version. So with the Harrier 2 Plus, both of them in fact are relatively slow planes. So their speed isn't that great, their profile isn't great, their fuel isn't really that great. Worth pointing out. But they do have two specific roles. One, they can fly low and slow enough that they can deal with enemy helicopters. So if you've got a marine deck, this is the role that you might use your Harriers for when it comes to air superiority. Don't have these tangled with jet fighters. They're going to lose against the vast majority of jet fighters in the game. Though you can certainly give them a good weapon payload that they can handle them. But primarily the role of Harriers is dealing with enemy helicopters and ground attack roles. So if we look at the difference between the two of them, it's the kind of weapons that they do have. So the Harrier 2 Plus has the GAU-12, so that is a machine gun right there available for it. So the difference is like you can either have a machine gun or an ACM pod, or a designation pod. Now, what I know about jets in real life, so what I've read is that actually having this the gun in a pod can make for better shooting with regards to that. I'm not sure if that's represented at all in the game. I guess it makes sense, but all the same. So you can either have an ECM pod, a designation pod, or just the gun itself, or combination of the two of these. Obviously, if you have ECM, it's going to give you protection against enemy missiles. So if you're dealing with a lot of missiles, you might want to go for that. That's with your center line. With your inner pylons, you've got a selection between bombs, Maverick missiles, AMRAAMs, AIM-120s, fuel tanks, or Zuni rockets. Not sure I would want to have rockets on a plane. It seems like a complete waste of resources. Though, to be fair, Harriers are cheap enough as planes that you could probably use them, but I'm not necessarily fond of that. I prefer to use helicopters for that role, if anything. But hey, if you want to put that on a plane, you can do so. Then we have middle pylons, Mavericks, AIMs, Sidewinders, or GPUs available for that. So smart bombs available with these guys. So you might want the laser designator, or you might want a combination of jets or helicopters or anything with like laser designator to really make that work. And then with outer pylons, you either have AMRAAMs or you have anti-radiation missiles with the AGM-122 right there. So you can have anti-radiation capacity on the Harrier 2 Plus. For the Night Attack Harrier, the weapons are different. So you don't have ECM, you don't have a laser designator, so it's more basic. It's cheaper, to be certain, but it's obviously a more basic. So the way I would see the Night Attack version of the Harrier, it's kind of like the cheapest version of it. Though you can get cruise high drag bombs on it if you want to, with regards to these. So yeah, these are the Night Attack version is primarily for ground attack, whereas the Harrier 2 Plus is really going to be useful in different roles, so air-to-air if you want that, especially against helicopters, dealing with enemy SAM sites, all that kind of stuff. But if you want to deal with enemy SAM sites, you do have the EA-6B Prowler. Now, the Prowler is an electronic warfare aircraft. So what you have here are two pylons, inner pylons and outer pylons on each wing. You can either install, for the inner pylons, you can either install harm missiles or fuel tanks, or one fuel tank, one harm. Now, the value proposition over here is that the fuel capacity of the EA6B Prowler may not necessarily be the best, but if you do just want to have a plane that's hunting SAMs, this is probably one of the better bets in the game. One, cost, so it's cheap enough that you can use it. Obviously, it's going to be shut down fairly quickly by any kind of air-to-air, in any air-to-air situation. So you want to be careful about enemy fighters in that situation, or you want to provide top cover for them. But they can be useful in that role, so with anti-radiation missiles. Then you have the F-18s. So you have the C and the D version. So the D is the two-seater version, the C is the one-seater version. The way to view these is that the C is the air-to-air version, the D is the air-to-ground version, though of course they can both perform that role because they both have that kind of capability. But the primary role of the F-18C is air-to-air because it's not going to have the best kind of air-to-ground capability of planes. So you do have AMRAAMs, you do have some missiles, you do have fuel tanks, so if you want to just have a jet loitering around to be able to deal with different things over there, this is something you can use. With the D version, we look at it, that has a designation pod in the center line. On the fuselage, it has some AMRAAMs that it can equip over there, or Sparrows. Recommend, like, I don't necessarily view the Sparrow as necessarily being useful, personally. But then you have inner pylons and outer pylons, and you do have a bunch of different choices. So Maverick missiles, Rockeye high drag bombs, Snake Eye high drag bomb, Fire bomb, JDAMs, so smart bombs over there. Then you do have available. That's the value of the designation pod over there, and then you do have the cruise missile option available over there in the outer pylons through the SLAM missile. So that's the role of the Ds. Then you have the F-35B. Now the F-35B doesn't have a gun by default, nor can you install one, which is weird because the F-35B in real life does have a gun pod similar to the Harrier that can be installed on it. But when you look at the F-35B, obviously, it's going to be pretty good in air-to-air because of its stealth profile. So it has a 175 stealth profile. When we're looking at durability, it's similar durability across the board. But what we should, one of the things to consider with the F-35B is the fact that it does have those electronic countermeasures, which, by the way, the C and D F-18s also have. But it does have a combination of different weapons. You can use it for to-ground attack, though. Personally, I would prefer using the... if I'm going to have an F-35B, I'd probably prefer to use it for air-to-air, even if it doesn't necessarily have the best kind of weapons for that specific role. But 4 AMRAAMs are 4 AMRAAMs. You can't argue with that specific point. And it does have a laser designator there. So maybe one of the best ways to use the F-35B would be to secure airspace, and then also use that laser designator that it does have. Then you have the KC-130J Harvest Hawk. So you can put some Griffin missiles, you can put some Hellfire 18 missiles and all that. It is a transport planes or airborne, airdropped infantry, all that. But the most important thing about it is when you look at the C-130s, they're really durable. They're slow, but they're a big, slow-ass moving target. So if you want to bait an enemy into attacking something in the air, so they commit air assets that they have off map, and they're spending points, and they're not targeting your fighters as they're entering, you can use Harvest Hawk as a kind of as a bait for the enemy. That would be my perspective. It's not the best bait. The best bait would be something like the AC-130 because it's cheaper, but still is available. Then you have airborne infantry. we get the almighty A10C Thunderbolt 2. So what do you have? You have the awesome gun, you have electronic countermeasures, you do obviously have decoys. So what kind of weapons do you have? Obviously, air-to-air capability over here is not going to be the greatest, but you can get the designation pod, you can get AIM-9s and ECM, an ECM pod, or you can get 2 ECM pods in order to provide yourself more protection. Because obviously the A10 is not really a fast jet, like if we're looking at speed right here, right? A10 for the F-35, F-18, 540 for Harrier. So this is one of the, if not the slowest plane in the game. But obviously, it's designed. It's designed to be able to handle a number of things. So it does have armor points beyond HP. Like it has a decent amount of HP, but it does have that level of armor. Because titanium cockpit is a titanium cockpit, right? But yeah. Obviously, you do have Mavericks. The number of them that you have, it depends on how many points you want per jet, right? But personally, I would just go full on with 6 of them. Like, funnily enough, the tutorial one only gives you 2, which is ridiculous. Like, you do want to have these. You can also go for GPUs, JDAMs, if you want that kind of capability. But I would probably not go full on with regards to that with an A10, though it depends on the kind of battlefield you have. Like, JDAMs can be useful in certain situations where the Mavericks are not going to be so great. Don't expect to be doing too many gun runs with regards to it. And you do need vision on the enemy, and you need kind of like an open enough space to be able to pull it off with Maverick missiles. Then there's the B-1 Lancer. The B-1 Lancer has all kinds of bombs. Obviously, it's an expensive plane, especially if you go for a tactical nuclear weapon on the damn thing. Actually, the plane itself is fairly cheap. What makes it expensive is the fact that you do obviously have to, like, if you could go with it unloaded, it's like this would be the ultimate screw you, I'm going to just distract you, because it's 100 points by default, right? Without any kind of weapon on it, but you do have to take a weapon. So yeah, all kinds of weapons, cruise missiles available on this. So you do have different types of cruise missiles, bombs available, smart bombs, cluster munitions available on this plane. Depends on what you're dealing with, what you need it for the mission profile. Then you have the C-130J Hercules and the C-17. So transport planes, paratrooping, and again, like with other C-130s, you can use this as a distraction, the J version. I would not use a C-17 for the sake of distraction. It's a really big freaking target, to be sure, but it's not necessarily going to perform the best role for that. It's also more expensive. Then you have F-15. So F-15C, Strike Eagle, and EX Eagle 2. Let's go over the difference. The C is your primary air-to-air version of the F-15. So you get MRAMs, you get Sparrows over there in the fuselage. You get more MRAMs, more AIM-9s, and you can also install fuel tanks. So the way you can use the C is like just have it loiter around with a bunch of missiles, with as many missiles as you can equip it. So if we go full on ahead with as many MRAMs, like we're looking at 8 over there, MRAMs that we can have over there with a decent level of fuel on it. But believe it or not, the F-15C is not necessarily going to be the best plane for that specific role. That might be the Eagle 2. Strike Eagle, the primary purpose is air-to-ground capability. So it does have all kinds of bombs, all kinds of munitions on ground targets over here. So JDAMs, cluster munitions. It obviously does have MRAM, so it can have that mixed role if you want to go with it. For it, personally, I would just use, if I'm going to use a Strike Eagle, I'm going to use it for air-to-ground attack. But then we have the Eagle 2. Now, Eagle 2s can go either way. So Eagle 2s are ridiculous in terms of what they can do. They're obviously the most expensive version, but they do have an insane level of capability on them. So let's take a look at what is available right here. So you have cruise missiles, you have different kinds of air-to-ground munitions. But this is what I mean, you do have those options. So you can either get a bunch of air-to-air missiles, far more so than I think any other plane in the game, or you can go for a bunch of air-to-ground munitions, one way or another, or a combination of the two of them. But again, I would not use a jet like this. Like, if I want an air-to-ground attack, like, I'm not really sold on the idea of having a multi-role fighter with different munitions, because, like, if I need a strike mission, I'm gonna call in a strike plane. If I need an airplane to fight jet fighters, I'm gonna call in that. You can do so, but it is a lot of points. The primary value, I would dare say, with something like an F-15EX is the sheer ridiculous number of munitions that this thing can carry. Because it can carry 20 AMRAAMs. And while you may not want to run around with 20 AMRAAMs, you can still run around with 16 with extra fuel capacity and just have this thing loiter around. It may not win against every jet in a fight. Like, you know, an Su-57 is going to do pretty well, obviously an F-22 and F-35, but the sheer ridiculous number of freaking missiles on this thing makes this a really, really good choice. And you do have ECM on all of these F-15s right here. In fact, the jet fighters of the airborne infantry all have ECM. Obviously, the strategic bomber and the cargo planes don't. Then you have Striker Cavalry Regiment. You get the venerable B-52. Yeah, it's a pretty big and long plane. I've seen a B-52 in real life. There's a museum south of Cambridge. I've been there in England. And they had the B-52. It was bigger than most other things in the hangar. And there was an SR-71 in that hangar. It's like the B-52 was bigger than SR-71. And SR-71 is pretty damn big. Anyway, so unfortunately with the B-52, you actually don't have nukes, which is weird. I'm gonna say, like, that is the primary reason the B-52 was built. I'm not sure if it... Like, I think in real life, actually, funnily enough, it should be the B-1 that doesn't have a nuke, because I think that the nuclear launch capability of the B-1s was removed because Russia-American treaty. The B-52 probably still has that capability as far as I'm aware. It was a question of limiting the launch platform. So yeah, B-52 should have a tactical nuke. I'm not sure why they decided to remove that. But what instead you have designation pods. You have a ton of munitions. So cruise missiles, 8 cruise missiles, 45 free-fall bombs. So if you want to carpet bomb the crap out of someone, you can do so. So different kinds of cruise missiles, ones that need laser designators, some that don't, but you do have that capability with B-52. So if an F-15EX is a missile truck, the B-52 is a bomb truck in every way that matters. Then you have the venerable F-16. So F-16C, J, and Viper. Viper is the more modern version. So if we look at the C, it doesn't have electronic countermeasures. The other two versions do have that. You can install it if you want to for extra points. You do have a different range of weapons over here. So air-to-ground, air-to-air, because that's the role of the F-16. Again, from my view, I would just dedicate it. Like, I think the value proposition, if you will, for an F-16C is probably air-to-air combat. Maybe get an ECM. Depends on how far you want to go. You can go cheap. You can go expensive. Personally, I prefer going expensive with planes. But, you know, if you just want to have more in your deck, that's your choice. Then you have the J version. So you have ECM pods, fuel tanks, and harm missiles. So this is the aircraft you may want to use for anti-radiation warfare. So if you want to take down enemy air defenses, this is what you would use, because you do have those two harms, though it does come at the cost of either fuel tanks or ECM. So if you want to use the J for air-to-air, that's something you can do. But yeah, so the J can be primarily to deal with enemy air defenses or to install some air-to-air munitions over there, like 4 MRAMs on it. Then you have the Viper. Viper is, you know, kind of more multi-role. Like F-16C, like, does have multi-role capability. But Viper is just going to be better, though obviously more expensive. So all kinds of ECM, designation pod, like it has by default ECM, but you can make that even better. And all kinds of munitions. Don't expect an F-16, though, to really carry an air battle. I would say that from the perspective of an F-16, I would now rely on the Striker Cavalry Regiment units to win an air battle. But I think they can support an air grouping. Like, because you can get some of these planes cheaper than others, so, and provide you some kind of capability, especially in terms of suppressing air defenses. But then we have the Special Operations Forces, who have the best planes in the freaking game. Seriously, I'm not joking on this. Like, if you want the biggest combination of the most ridiculous planes, it's with the Special Operation Forces, so with SOCOM. You have the AC-130, so this is the best air bait in the game, I think, because it's cheap. It can have a good amount of capability on it. So the thing about an AC-130, you can't ignore an AC-130, because if you ignore an AC-130 and you let it do a bomb run, you're going to regret that. So you're going to need to shoot it down. So either your ground defenses are going to be revealed, or you're going to have to call in gens to deal with it, and that's the value proposition. Of course, it does have all kinds of munitions, Griffin missiles, Stormbreaker, Hellfire missiles. I'm not really sold on using Hellfires, though, on the AC-130. Then we have the B-2 Spirit. The B-2 Spirit, well, the default load-up of a B-2 Spirit is a tactical nuke. But if you want a bunker buster, you can install 2 of these things and just completely obliterate anything that's in your way. So yeah, big-ass bomb. Though I'm not sure they make sense. Or GPU 57. Pretty sure those are bunker busters anyway. So all kinds of different munitions over here available for these. So smart bombs, more smart bombs, cruise missiles, and a tactical nuclear strike. Then you have the F-117, which apparently America is still flying most of them, though mostly using them for training purposes and testing. But yeah, you do have all kinds of air-to-ground munitions, because that's what the F-117 is capable of doing. Maybe just stick a bunch of cruise missiles on it, or JDAMs on it. It can't carry the largest amount of them, though, unfortunately, so there is that catch with the F-117. But it's still a stealth aircraft. I do have to say, I find it ridiculous that all the stealth aircraft, like be it F-22, B-2, F-35, all have the same stealth profile of 175, which is like, no, the F-22 should have a better stealth profile, and the B-2 should have the best stealth profile by far, like even double it of the Raptor, or certainly the F-35. Anyway, and yeah, better than the F-117. Then we get to the mighty and venerable F-22 Raptor, which also had a premium skin for Vanguard Edition owners, like myself. So, what do you have on the Raptor? You do have actually a range of munitions, but I think it would be fair to say that if you're using a Raptor for anything other than air superiority, you're not using a Raptor properly. That is my perspective. Yes, you can use it for ground attack. They have been used for that in real life. Those internal bases can carry some air-to-ground munitions, but I would primarily use it to dominate the skies, because there's very few things that are going to be able to hold their own against a Raptor. It's just that great of a plane, that stealth profile, the speed that it has, the turn radius, all that. So it's really good. It doesn't have as many missiles as the ridiculousness of an EX Eagle 2, but still really good. Then you have the F-35A. So F-35A does have anti-radiation missiles, all kinds of different options available, but you can get like 2 harm anti-radiation missiles in it, so you can use this to suppress our defenses. I want to point out something, and this is given my experience playing things like Wargame, playing Warno, and yeah, this however many hours. I haven't played a lot of hours in multiplayer in this, but you know, if you've played war game, you know what you expect. Like, it's the same meta, if you will. And I mention this because in those kind of games, how many air defenses do you think there are going to be in a map? Like, how many Patriots and S-300s do you believe? If there's more than 3, that's pushing it. 3 is already a lot. Generally, I expect 2 in a lot of situations. You can have 3, you can have more. It does happen, but a lot of the time you're going to see something like 2 Patriots, 2 S-300s. Maybe you'll see some Tors, maybe you'll see some Strikers, etc. But that's the kind of general situation you're going to have in a 5v5. So a single anti-radiation missile on something like an F-35 can do a pretty good job in terms of suppressing some portion of the enemy air defenses. And then you have the MC-130H, more expensive than the Ghost Rider, but obviously this is a cargo plane, that's the main role. Personally, I don't necessarily care too much about it. I mean, yeah, you can transport 64 soldiers, cargo capacity, etc. But personally, if I'm transporting stuff, I kind of don't want to reveal my hand to the enemy. So this is one of the things I have to say about airborne infantry. I understand the value, but unless you're dropping them behind your lines, then I think it's just better to use helicopters. Unless you want to transport heavy equipment, but you do have Chinooks available for that. Anyway, that's all I had to say. Christine signing out.